And I took my scope and soldering iron and a bag of resistors into this room, and for 3 or 4 days I sat there just changing resistor values to change signal levels through the machine to the way I liked it. And I decided I wanted the signal to be hotter even though I'd live with the distortion. And that's the sound.
Today we're at the home of Tom Oberheim, one of the original pioneers who shaped synthesizers and music history. Tom's legacy includes some of the most groundbreaking innovations: a standalone ring modulator, the first commercially available phase shifter pedal, which is my personal favorite, an early digital sequencer, the Oberheim DS-2, and the SEM, the first commercially available polyphonic synthesizer, made in 2, 4, and 8 voice models, followed by my favorites, such as the OBX, OBX-A, OB8, Xpander, Matrix 12, DMX drum machine, and many more. Of course, most importantly, he gave us the unmistakable Oberheim sound on his entire collection of iconic synthesizers that inspired compositions and performances on countless records by multiple generations of artists. Joining me for this special interview is my friend, Rob Rosen from Rosen Sound, talented musician and renowned expert in synthesizer restoration and preservation, and someone who's worked closely with Tom to keep Oberheim instruments and all vintage synthesizers alive for future generations of musicians. We'll also be joined by Marcus Ryle, who's done so much. Marcus began his career working closely with Tom at Oberheim, was a session musician, designed dozens of affordable and accessible products for Alesis, including the ADAT multi-track recorder, Quadraverb digital reverb, and the HR drum machine, and later co-founded Line 6, creating innovative guitar effects and revolutionizing digital modeling technology. I'm so happy to be here with Marcus and Rob for a rare and in-depth conversation with the great Tom Oberheim. It's obvious that you're a creator and an inventor and a designer and a visionary, because there's a lot of indisputable evidence over the last 40 years of that. But what I don't know is what has inspired you. What gave you meaning in life? What was important to you?
I think that what was the most fulfilling thing was making stuff that I designed. And I could look at something, whether it was a computer I did in the 1960s or in the 70s, 80s, 90s and on, stuff that musicians used. Mm-hmm. But it was the electronics and then making equipment for people that I admired. I think that's the real thing that's been the cornerstone of my work career.
That's a great vocation.
I think the first experience of that is when I spent 7 or 8 years at UCLA getting my bachelor's degree. They don't let you do that anymore, but they did then. And I met some musicians there. One of them was a woman named Dorothy Moskowitz, who had been part of a band in the 60s called the United States of America, and she came to me after the first band broke up, and she reorganized it into the second band. And the first band, an engineer had designed a ring modulator for that band, and when the first band broke up and Dorothy started the second band, she asked me to build her a ring modulator.
That's how it started.
That's how it started. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what a ring modulator was. And so I was no longer a student at UCLA, but I had access to the UCLA Engineering Library and went up there and went through the library and finally found an article in a little magazine at the library that said how to use a ring modulator in musical application, and I built them, and that was the first product I made. And at first it was like this thing that I couldn't imagine how somebody could want to use it in a musical application, because to me it's just like kind of like this noise. But then somehow the word got out that I was building ring modulators, and then heard Jan Hammer play it on a record he did when he was with the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and then I heard Joe Zawinul when he was with Cannonball Adderley do some stuff, and it was like, wow, this is, I built this thing, but people are using it to do music. So that's how it started.
So like you said earlier, you started to get that feeling of what it was like. You were saying you were building things that people were going to use.
Right, this back and forth. I do something and I get something back.
That's kind of what I was wondering. Yeah. That's the inspiration. And
it is kind of interesting I like that you talked about that origin story, because as you said, you had this really early interest in electronics, and it's really kind of chance that it crossed over because of the musicians you were working with, to think, oh, I can apply the electronics to music. Whereas a lot of people, like myself included, I had an interest in electronics, but it was my desire to learn things was because I specifically wanted to do something for music. So I came from music first, and a lot of people they develop in that way. I think it's quite fortuitous that opportunity happened at UCLA. Otherwise, you might have just gone on and designed a bunch of supercomputers and things like that. But that connection with those musicians kind of lit that spark.
Well, the good news was, by the time I'd done 11 years designing computer stuff, I was burned out. I didn't want to do that again. So getting involved with modest little situations where I built something for a musician and it slowly built up, it was, that's what my life became.
And by the way, a ring modulator, you can also get great tremolo on it. So it doesn't have to just be, boingy and clangy. I want to take a second to remind you to like and subscribe, leave a comment, and ring the bell so you don't miss any future videos. And go to AnthonyMarinelliMusic.com to find exclusive free content and more. And thank you for all your amazing support. Let's get back to this video.
About the same time that I just started selling ring modulators, I had a friend who was teaching high school at a little college in North Hollywood, and he said, "These kids, I've got these. There's some kids there that have a band, and 3 or 4 of them have a band, and they were still, they were still high school students, but they were gathered around listening to when George Harrison first used guitar through a Leslie speaker on a record."
Yeah.
So I went back to, I wouldn't call it a lab. I had a 1-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica, and it just happened that a friend of mine had not a B3, had a C3 and a Leslie, and let me borrow it, and I listened to it, and I really didn't have much knowledge of sound physics yet, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, vibrato, tremolo, whatever. I just by chance, I saw in a magazine a circuit called a phase shift circuit. And I'd just been talking to one of the guys who was a pioneer in synthesizers in the LA area, Paul Bieber, who I asked him, I'd heard flanging on a record, and I said, that sounds really cool. And I asked Paul Bieber, well, how do you make that? He said, well, 2 tape recorders, put the same signal in, you take them out, you mix them so they cancel, and you change the speed and you get that sound. I think, phase shift, blah, 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 and whatever. So I built up this little circuit, and the key to the phase shifter that I made, and every phase shifter I think since, was not that you put the signal through the phase shifter and then took it out, because you wouldn't hear any difference, because it wasn't changing the frequency, it was changing the phase. But if you mixed the phase shifter with the original signal, then you got these wonderful cancellations. Yeah. And if you modulate that, you got a phase shifter.
So I get the change.
So I at that point, I was selling my ring modulator through a Chicago music company, and I built up a prototype of a phase shifter, and I showed it to the guy, and he said, "Well, it doesn't make much sound," because he was thinking phase or fuzz tone and all that.
Yeah,
but
right.
we'll sell a few. So I started making Maestro phase shifters, selling to this company that owned the Maestro name, and the next 3.5 years I did about 70,000 Maestro phase shifters.
It was the first effects pedal that I ever had, and I still have it, and it's still my favorite.
I still have mine too.
Yeah, and I love that it had the little screw so that you can put it on a mic stand.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's really unique.
And I think it's just, those 3 tabs, well, a few things. I think it's great that the fact that it speeds, there's only three
Like a
speed
Leslie.
controls.
Blue,
speeds up
yellow,
like,
and orange.
like a Leslie does, because that was the original inspiration. And I'm fascinated with how many products in our industry started out with one intention, like this, like could I simulate a Leslie, but ends up creating something entirely new that's so musically useful.
Yeah.
I mean, even Harold Rhodes was, the story was just trying to make a portable piano for the Army.
Yeah.
I mean, he was probably trying to make it sound like a piano, right? But instead it had a total sound of its own that was, critical in music history. So, this attempt to make a Leslie speaker invents what today still, modern usage of a phase shifter. It's iconic as a sound, and I think every phase shifter since has been a result of that original Maestro.
I wish I was there in North Hollywood to be able to see what was going on, because I grew up in North Hollywood.
Yeah, you were right there.
I was right there, and this phase shifter really changed it for me, because I had just a Yamaha organ, and I couldn't afford any of that stuff.
Speaking of organs, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but it was unusual, these 3 big paddle switches. But wasn't that because Norland owned also an organ company?
Norland had Lowry organs,
Lowry.
and they insisted that the switches, rather than toggles, or there'd be organ. I didn't want to do that, but they were the boss. So
it's the switches they had, presumably. Maybe
it's right
maybe
off,
they had
right off
excess
the
inventory
Lowry organ,
of these big organ switches, and that's why the Maestro Tom's phase shifter has these big switches on it.
They feel great, though, don't they?
They do. It's very deliberate. There's something just really reassuring when you hit those switches.
Have you ever seen the foot pedal for it? The foot switch?
It's a weird plug in the back, right?
Yeah,
I've never seen the foot switch.
I got one at a yard sale with the foot switch. It's the wild. It's like I know it doesn't sound remarkable, but it's actually really interesting.
Did you design the foot switch too?
You hit it, and with your foot it changes the carrier frequency.
Yeah.
I mean, or not the
modulation
LFO frequency, and so you can hit it, and then. I'm proud of that. I mean, that circuit took one resistor and one capacitor. Pretty simple. In fact, by this time I'd met Keith Barr when he had MXR, and he brought out the Phase 90 about a year and a half later. And of course, I didn't know about guitars. I didn't know about what people were doing. I heard it on a record, but I didn't realize what was going on with guitars. And so it never occurred to me to do what Keith did when he put the phase shifter in a nice little box and made it very convenient. But he did say he admired me for that circuit that you change the LFO and it would go down in. So anyway. There you are.
One of the first pedals, right?
Yeah. That Maestro. Well, the MXR.
Well, no, the Maestro.
The Maestro phase shifter was really the first phase shifter, and I think it inspired folks like Keith.
No, there were a lot of pedals by then. There were, of course, a lot of fuzz tones.
Mainly distortions, fuzz
there
phase.
was some octave dividers, I think, by then. But
really,
that's true.
But so anyway, it put me on the map. Instead of working out of my, actually it was a closet, was my lab.
Wow.
In this little apartment, I was able to actually have a place because I did build 70,000 of those over 3 or 4 years.
That's a lot,
It's
right, Marcus?
amazing,
You know
yeah.
numbers like that.
No,
That's nothing compared to line
Yeah, but
6.
he knows but in the time.
At that time, it's remarkable.
It has to be at the time.
I mean, when we were talking the other week, we were talking about like less than 3,000 OB8s, you know,
Probably,
and then we're
that's what we
talking
figured.
70,000 phase shifters. That's a lot.
It's a lot of phase shifters.
It sounds like a lot.
And you built all those in Santa Monica, right?
Little storefront in Santa Monica. I had a woman who I'd met and worked with at actually at a little computer consulting company, and she had 2 or 3 helpers. The circuit boards were actually assembled in Mexico in those early days, and there was a simple little thing, a circuit board, a piece of metal. So and that was over 3 or 4 years, but yeah.
If each one of you could ask Tom one question that you would want people that you think would be really valuable, what would it be? Do you mind each doing that? I'm
You're
so
putting me on the
curious.
spot really hard now.
Oh, I could jump in. I know there's one I genuinely want to know because I feel like I know a lot of the history, but you think about this, right? You had this wonderful serendipitous moment that connected your passion for electronics to music with these musicians. And really your first 2 products were very specific requests from customers, you could say, right? I want a ring modulator, and I want a Leslie speaker simulator. And these 2 great products were born. You might have ended up with a career where you just did effects, because that's where your start was. And what's interesting, and I'm curious to really understand the origin, is you brought your digital knowledge back into the mix,
Right.
and did the DS-2 next. A breakthrough, the first real digital sequencer that you could store a lot of steps, and it remembered the timing you played. It was like a real time.
Before he did an analog synth.
This is before
Well,
before you built an analog
Before
synth.
I built an
I
analog.
had no idea.
But to me, this is such a pivotal moment because
Yeah.
it's the key as to why later the SEM was built. So I'm just curious, was there a similar thing? Was there a musician or someone asking for
No, that was pretty much on my own.
on your own? So what?
Yes.
Okay.
That's amazing.
What was that?
Great
Well,
question.
what was that spark?
By the time I was, building ring modulators, phase shifters, I was starting to have some connections to the synth world, the budding synth world in Los Angeles, and one of the places, of course, I first saw a big Moog was at Paul Bieber's when he played me that marvelous descending chord that comes down that later, and he did that on an analog synth that later was the thing in movies.
The inspiration for the THX sound.
And it was so lame that on the one they did that when it opened a movie with this and it was so lame compared to the one that Paul Bieber had done 6, 7, 8 years earlier. Anyway, so also I knew I'd seen sequencers at Paul's place where and then also I knew some of the people that were at the UCLA Electronic Music Lab, and they had both a Buchla and an ARP, and of course one of the common things was a sequencer, but they were knobs, and the only sequencers I'd ever seen at that point where it was a constant clock running through 8 or 16 or 3 or whatever, and it was always constant.
Yeah.
And somehow, after 11 years of designing digital logic, I got this idea to make a sequencer that you could store not only the pitches but the durations. And so I built this thing called the DS-2. It was a big box about this big, and it was real crude. It was all digital logic. There were no microprocessors that were cheap enough to use in products yet. And I built the DS-2, and I sold a bunch of them. And but there was a problem with it. And that is, in those days, most people that played synthesizer had one synthesizer. And I designed this so it could work with a 2600, an Odyssey, or a Mini Moog. And if you only had one synthesizer, you could play your synthesizer and load the sequence, load the notes into the sequencer, and you play them back through your synthesizer.
Right.
But you couldn't both play your synthesizer and have the sequencer playing the
Sure.
because you got to have more than one. So that gave me the idea to make the world's smallest, cheapest, simplest synthesizer, which was later called the SEM, Synthesizer Expander Module. Now, I thought that was the absolute minimum synth you could make, but some of the companies from the Far East found ways to make it even better, but worse. But anyway, forget that. And so now I had the SEM that I sold by itself, and so you could have a synth and hook to the sequencer, and you could load in notes, and you could then start the sequencer playing through the SEM, and that was the idea. Now, I don't know how many people bought it and did that exact thing with it,
Right.
but I sold quite a few SEMs because one of the things I did with the SEM was I chose to use a 2-pole filter rather than a 4-pole because the 2600, the Odyssey, the Mini Moog, and just everybody was doing 4-pole filters. So I read about 2-pole filters and synthesizers from a AES technical paper that had been written by a guy named Dennis Colin, who was the guy that designed the 2600. And when I put together the SEM, I had Dennis design the filter for it. I had Dave Rossum, who at that point, he and his partner Scott had started EMU, and then I had an engineer working for me, Jim Cooper, and we put this all together. And so not only was it another synthesizer, but you got two more oscillators, plus you could have a combination of a 4-pole in your regular synth and a 2-pole in the SEM. And it was a useful little, not exactly a gadget.
So when you're making all this, you're in your storefront in Santa Monica.
That's right.
And you were an ARP dealer, if I'm not mistaken.
And I was, yeah, and the reason I forgot to mention that the thing that got me into synths on another level was it took me about 6 months, but I finally got ARP to let me be the dealer for Los Angeles. And so I knew 2600, I knew the Odyssey. I sold, interesting, Lalo Schifrin was in the news because he passed away here in the last week. And I sold him his 2600. I sold George Duke his Odyssey.
Wow.
I sold Leon Russell a 2600, which was a nightmare. And
wow.
all these synths, and now I'm talking about true analog synthesizer. We're not talking about organs or organ-like things. I'm talking about true voltage-controlled analog synthesizers. All had one characteristic. They were monophonic. And it didn't take me talking to a lot of musicians to realize that wouldn't a polyphonic synthesizer be great, but what would it sound like? So in this time period of the early 1970s, a good friend of mine who was a professor, a music professor at a small college in Los Angeles, he was a really great improviser, and he'd give improviser concerts, and we knew each other from UCLA, and so we started doing some simple live electronic music. And I got this idea, there's one other thing. One of the things that I discovered that on the ARP 2600, of course, it converted whatever you play on the keyboard to a control voltage to drive the oscillators, whatever. The first time I opened up the bin box for the 2600 that had the circuitry that developed the control voltage, I noticed there's some circuitry on there that wasn't stuffed. It wasn't assembled. And I traced out the circuit, and it turned out that our 2500 had this feature where you could play 2 notes and get 2 CVs. And so I had started making a little kit that I sold to people that they could get 2 CVs out of their 2600s. So I got this idea. Oh, is this it?
That's it.
Oh my God! Look
Rob
at that.
found one.
Oh my God! Well, that's a long time ago.
And that's the version that has your name on the back.
It certainly does.
How does Rob have one?
So I got this idea at one of the concerts that my friend was doing. I took 2 2600s, and they both had my 2-voice kit, and I could stack the two keyboard 2600 keyboards like this, and my friend was really smart at this. So he, even though you could play 2 notes on this and 2 notes on this one, he was good enough to really make music out of that. And when I heard that, as crude as it was, it's like, oh, I got to do that.
And this is early 70s.
This is the early 70s.
Right.
And before the SEM, but I had no idea of how to do that.
Right.
I mean, how could you make get 4 notes or 6 notes out of a keyboard? I couldn't. So anyway,
What did you feel though when you heard that? Enough to dedicate a portion of your life to try to make it happen.
No, all I did was I liked the sound.
As simple as that.
I had no idea how to do that at that point, because I didn't have the SEM yet. So I went on in the 73, 74, making pedals, because not only did I have the phase shifter, the ring modulator, I had 2 or 3 other pedals, and that was my business.
And the sequencer.
And I sold some sequencers, but that wasn't a big business, part of the business. So on January 25th of 1975, the Chicago company called up and said, we're canceling all our orders. Times are tough. We're canceling all the orders. Sorry. And at that point, I had, 3, 4 people working for me. I had to keep them employed. And I figured it took me less than the hours in the remaining day of that phone call to take 4 SEMs. I knew that EMU had a polyphonic scanning keyboard.
The 4060.
And licensed it from them and put in a little mixer. And so starting basically on January 26, 1975, at the June NAMM show in June of 1975 in Chicago, I had a prototype with a 4-voice.
Was that the first polyphonic synth?
Let's put it this way. By the time I got it done and was making it, it was the first polyphonic synthesizer you could buy in a music store. And I still remember when the owner of Manny's Music, in those days Manny's Music was the big music store in New York, and came by and said, well, what is this? I said, well, it's a polyphonic synthesizer. He says, well, what does it cost? And I said, it's $4,000. He said, $4,000? There's nothing in my store that's $4,000. And, but the word got around. Eventually, I started selling them, and by, into 1976, people are starting to use it.
Oh yeah.
And I was in the synth business.
They wanted to hear what you heard. They heard it and they
That's
like,
right.
I want to do that.
That's right.
People got
Polyphonics-
to experience that for the first time, and it definitely was.
Oh, please!
James
I
said
remember
you,
what
right?
I was thinking when I, you know.
I remember the first time I heard one. Yeah, it was no question. But I think what's amazing to me, I think about that period. The DS-2 was that around 1971, 72?
72.
72.
71.
71. No, so when you think about it, right, at that point, Tom was involved in synthesizers. Now, ARP, you saw the Moog, you saw these sequencers. For that era, before microprocessor use and so on, the DS-2 was really, really brilliant because before then, every sequencer was essentially a step sequencer. You could do your sequential thing. You could turn a knob for each control voltage, try to get it in tune. So it digitized the voltage, just to get nerdy for a second, right? The voltage came in, it was digitized, it was turned into a number, and then there was a much higher clock than you typically would use on a sequencer that was essentially a counter. And so digitally it was keeping track of how many counts happened between each note. So it sounds so basic today, but you literally could just, on your synthesizer, play whatever you wanted with any time reference you wanted,
right,
up to 144 notes, I think it was. Right, I remember it was 72 at first, and then it expanded to 144.
Which is way more notes. Like the biggest one was like 24. You have 3 blocks of 8.
3 blocks of 8, 24. So it's like 144. So,
and you didn't have to tune it either. It would what you put in.
Once it was calibrated, you did have to make sure that
there wasn't
that was
offset.
calibrated to be the volt per octave. But then, it would play in tune. So that's a really great breakthrough that you could say was actually an accessory to other people's synthesizers. But what a great inspiration. It's like, well, wait, now I don't have a synthesizer anymore. And that kind of triggering you actually entering the synthesizer business, not just effects and peripherals.
It was simply from a design point of view, it was something, it was digital logic before microprocessors. And it was just the kind of work I'd done for 11 years in the computer business, putting together these things that we call AND gates, OR gates, and flip-flops. And so it was a fun thing to do. I probably sold maybe 100 total.
Wow.
Yeah, but the huge thing, you keep kind of getting to it, it's like so self-empowering.
But it led me to the
because you're
SEO.
seeing like, I can do this. And that's back to the message for people.
Yeah.
He started with the pedal, and then he came up with something. Now I have knowledge about digital, put that together, do something that can't be done. Now all of a sudden you got some feeling that you're bankable and you
Well, on one hand, I didn't have any choice because my pedal business went away, but it was a kind of a big step that I was joining the world where the Moogs were everywhere, the ARPs were everywhere, and we're starting to see some stuff from Roland, and it was a little scary, but all I had to do was hear, whether it was Joe Zawinul or Herbie in the early days, hear musician. This is back to this thing where I did something that was technical, and I got this wonderful feedback of this great music done. And I would never be able to myself to make that music, but I designed the instrument. So it was.
So that would lead me to my big question.
Okay, good.
How would you describe the Oberheim sound?
Oh, I know exactly. When the engineer that was working for me as a consultant, Jim Cooper, helped me with the SCM. I had, like I said, Dave Ross from the oscillator, and Dennis Colin did the filter, and then this engineer that I hired as a consultant did the envelope generators, and I did the power supply, and I did the front panel, and I got all this together. The first time that Jim got the prototype together, I listened to it, and I wasn't really happy with the way it sounded. And so I hired a room at this building where I had the storefront still building the pedals. And I took my scope and soldering iron and a bag of resistors into this room, and for 3 or 4 days I sat there just changing resistor values to change signal levels through the machine to the way I liked it. And Jim had kind of erred toward worrying about it just being keeping the distortion low, and I decided I wanted the signal to be hotter, even though I'd live with the distortion. And that's the sound. It is the sound.
Because it was musical to you. You were voicing it.
I was voicing it.
But it sounds like something you had to do. You had to get in there and do it.
I did it, and to tell you an interesting story, one of the characteristics of the two-pole filter in the SEM was, unlike a Mini Moog or an ARP 2600, if you turn the resonance up, eventually the 2600 or the Mini Moog the filter would oscillate. So you could get quite a bit of resonance, but it would oscillate. The two-pole filter, by design, does not oscillate. Now, funky resistors and stuff, sometimes they would oscillate on an SEM, but it was much higher resonance. And so in the 70s, people said, I love my SEM, but when I turn the resonance all the way up, it kind of distorts. In other words, they didn't like that. Now, jump ahead 30 years. Somebody had told me, the thing I like about the SEM, you turn the resonance up, it really distorts.
Like on the ARP 2600, you bring up the resonance and bye-bye bass. Mm-hmm. And so that was what drew me into it, because I could get resonant bass sounds that kick butt.
Yeah.
And you couldn't do it any other way. A quick thought for you. What would happen if you actually learned to think like a synth? You'll quickly edit presets to get the sound you need. You'll be able to make the sounds you're hearing in your head from scratch. You'll create your own sounds that will elevate your music and make it stand out. You'll be able to confidently program almost any synth. And you'll expand your sound palette for all your projects. All this and more is in my course, Think Like a Synth. My goal is to show you everything I've learned in my career, every technique, tip, and insight in an affordable, fun, hands-on synth course that you can immediately apply to your music. As you progress, you'll develop the unwavering confidence to know what every knob does before you turn it, which will empower you to create any sound in your imagination and set your music apart. Get a free lesson at anthonymarinellimusic.com and start creating legendary sounds for your music. We have a new guest. We have the pleasure of Tom's beautiful wife, Jill.
Thank you.
Who just popped in, and we just said, you got to sit down because you must know a lot about this.
I do.
You lived through it all.
Well, you know what? I just had them ask a question. Do you mind if we just try that once? Do you have a question for your husband that you haven't asked him or that would be interesting for our audience to know?
What do you want for supper, honey?
That's about it. One thing I can say about having my first company that we all know about, that developed everything OBX, 4/8 voice, all the way up to Matrix 12, was I was not a born entrepreneur. I was always running scared of keeping the company going. I didn't ever have any trouble, and I should say we never had any trouble deciding what to do next, because by the time I had Marcus and several other creative people working for him, both in sales and in engineering, the things we decided to do fell into place. We did the OBX, and it was good, but it was problematic in some areas, right? Mm-hmm. And we did the OBXA, and then I hired Marcus. His first project was the DSX, polyphonic sequencer, and of course the DMX, drum machine. We always knew what we were going to do because there was so much creativity at Oberheim in those days. But I, as a quote businessman, was always running scared.
But you intuitively surrounded yourself with great people and great great people first.
I think I was,
and great talent.
I think looking back, I did hire good people.
That's what a good business person does.
You've said one thing that really stood out to me as an entrepreneur, and that is when you had your orders canceled, you didn't say, good luck to everyone else. You said, I have to figure out how to keep these people
I
employed.
had to keep people working.
And that's a very selfless thing that I think a lot of people who aren't entrepreneurs maybe don't see that as it shows that you cared a lot about the people that work for you. And I have a lot of respect for that.
On a statistical basis, it's hard, unless a company is very successful, to always keep everybody employed. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen, but I was able to do it.
You can speak to that, Marcus. How do you do it?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, it certainly was, a sad chapter for us all and for the Oberheim brand, for the company to have failed in '85. I think indirectly, I kind of got to be one of the lucky recipients of it, because that was simply another aspect of the school of Oberheim for me, right? I mean, I started there at 19, so I learned a ton from Tom and from Jim and from others that were at the company, and what a great education it was. But it's, like Tom said, we had plenty of ideas and we would just kind of do things. It's easy for any entrepreneur to underestimate how much capital is required, especially if you're building hardware, to continue and sustain a company, and how little has to go wrong for that to fall apart.
Yes.
And so to see that, I had no idea it could be so fragile. And I had decided to start my next chapter. It was actually just 5 weeks before Oberheim filed bankruptcy. I don't claim to have any crystal ball and realized things were so bad. I left on April 19th of 1985. So realizing that, and by the way, Tom's not alone. Think of all the great brands, the great names, and Bob Moog and Alan R. Perlman and Roger Lynn and Dave Smith and Tom. It's like everyone had that moment.
Yeah.
Everyone went through that, because it really just shows these are all real smart, talented people. It's not just a question of, whether they had the business experience. It just shows how hard it can be to run a business and keep it successful. It's hard. So that was definitely an eye-opener for me and caused me to be extremely, extremely cautious.
But you realize, too, that the value of Oberheim was beyond just the economics. You were to wrap around decades later, right, and do something.
If we live long enough.
That's what's so amazing.
That is what's so key. There to have the to see how history has really validated the great work that we did then, and that has enabled the Oberheim brand to come back and Tom to come back is really wonderful.
I think when we were last at NAMM down in Disneyland.
Yes,
Across the street.
in
Anaheim.
Yeah.
And these kids came up and wanted Tom's autograph. I mean, he's standing there. I was really proud of him.
Yes.
People
That
were
was
very
special.
surprised to see him.
Just seeing how a whole new generation of musicians really appreciate what Tom brought to the music industry.
The true value is the economics can't transcend the real value, right, of something. And I think this is the perfect case study of
Well,
that.
it changes. The problem that Oberheim had to face, it was in 1978. It gotten to the point where we were selling quite a few 4-voice and 8-voice. It was, we were doing well. And then in the winter of 1978, when the NAMM show, when the winter NAMM show was very small, and in the basement of the Disneyland Hotel was this company, Sequential Circuits, and they had this thing called the Prophet 5. And by the time that But by the time that 1978 was over, the Prophet 5 had worked through its startup problems and was selling well, and the Oberheim 4-voice, 8-voice, which was the main stuff that we were selling, was dropping off very quickly. And for good reason, because the Prophet 5 showed the world what a modern synthesizer should be. It didn't take us that long to answer that challenge because we had the OBX out just less than a year later, but still there was a challenge.
That first Chicago NAMM, I have to say, just to how impressionable it was on a little kid like me, is that one of the first nights, my first NAMM show, I'm working for Oberheim, and Tom's like, "Hey, you want to go to dinner with me and Bob?" Like, Bob? Oh, you mean the Bob?
Oh,
And,
Bob Moog?
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and I'm,
Oh my gosh.
I'm 20 years old, and at the Drake Hotel, the restaurant of the Drake Hotel, me and Tom Oberheim and Bob Moog, and my eyes were probably this
What
big.
did you think? Did you
kinda how I feel right
imagine
now.
that they would be on the Mount Rushmore of?
Well,
did you
they
think-
already were.
They already were in your mind.
Moog had been quite famous for well over a decade. Oberheim synths were legendary and were on all the music I loved, and I got to have.
It's
dinner.
still early though because it's the advent of the polysynth. It just started.
Yes.
80,
Well,
81.
78. I mean, remember, polysynths. I mean, 75, the 4-voice. 78, the Prophet 5.
I guess I
79,
meant to
the
say
OBX.
the ones with the memory.
Yes. So that started in 78.
That's what I meant to say.
So
I
it was
didn't say
3
it.
years. I think when we look back, 3 years seems really short, right? But when you're living it, 3 years is a lot of. It was a lot of evolution
Oh my
from
goodness,
that
yeah.
Prophet 5 to the OBXA. Actually, we might have been 81. We were probably introduced the OBXA
I think so, yeah.
at that show. So it was like. It was
like the space
going
race.
fast. It was a
You guys,
space race.
in a short amount of
Yeah.
time, had to do something that was never done before.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a flash out of nowhere, oh, we better do a drum machine. We knew we had to do it because we've seen Rogers and we thought of what is a setup, what is a good setup? It's a synth, it's a drum machine and a sequence. I mean, you can do an awful lot with that, and people did.
Yeah, it felt like this. It was kind of this collective consciousness that happens, right? You think about, in fact, even like something even like MIDI, as revolutionary as it was inevitable, right? Because every company was figuring out, well, I got to be able to hook up a sequencer and a drum machine and a synth, and stuff has to talk to each other, and So Tom's right. It's like we just kind of seem to know. I remember distinctly, though, there was, on the one hand, we could be quite snobby. Sometimes we'd see a competitor's product, we'd bring it in, open it up, and have a good laugh at how it was designed, right? Because you just thought you were superior. And then you'd get something else, you'd open up and you go, oh crap. Like, it was quite frankly, the difference between opening up a memory Moog, which in that era was kind of late to the party of polysynths, and was quite convoluted inside and lots of wiring. It was like that. We kind of had a chuckle, and then the ARP Chroma going, oh wait a minute, there's some real clever stuff here.
Yeah.
And realizing they're onto something with what they're doing here. Hated the user interface, but the insides were brilliant, and that was a big inspiration for some of the things that ended up in the Xpander. So it's kind of like, I imagine it almost
hear
like
that.
bands, right? You'd hear about like the Beatles listening to Pet Sounds and how different bands would influence each other. I think that's kind of, we knew all the other designers. Everyone was so friendly, all the different
we knew
competitors.
everyone.
It was a very friendly competition, really. And you could, I think we all kind of inspired each other and fed on each other to just keep moving things
Some
forward.
of it was indicative of the time period, though, because the way technology was progressing from the 60s through to the 90s, right? Because it was prevalent everywhere. There was the race with the computers.
Well, the big
everywhere.
thing in what we did more than anything was inexpensive microprocessors, and then as well as a lot of other circuitry, digital as well as analog, that was affordable. Now it's just a chip for doing all these things. And of course, there's been chips all the way along, and as those chips came along, we used them. And that's helped us and everybody else to bring the price down.
But you put it in the hands of a musician, because I'm not going to do anything with a chip.
That's
Doesn't
right.
do anything for me. You gave me something with a keyboard. You gave me something that was in tune, that had knobs, that I can control things I was familiar with, brightness, pitch range. I could orchestrate. And I'm starting to feel now with the integration of MIDI and all these things, you guys were thinking now there's going to be new music composed on these things, and you're starting to integrate it into a music system, right? Now you have a drum machine. Then when were you guys feeling this, like that we're going to give it to the, not just players, right? Because we went through the little player period, the creators that wanted to integrate a system and compose on it. Was that something you were feeling?
Oh, I remember vividly because, that era you had, there was micro composers, right? Step pin sequencers with your voltages. Then, Roger came out with the original LM1. That was a big breakthrough. But it was a real problem for people to deal with. How do I synchronize any of this?
Yeah.
And there were even companies invented whose job was just to try to figure out how to connect different clocks and do all this sort of stuff.
Jim Cooper made
Jim
some
Cooper.
of those.
There was the Dr. Click.
Dan Garfield.
Dr. Click. These sort of things.
That was his name, by the way, too,
Yeah.
Dr. Click.
Well, yes.
I didn't know that.
So
He went by that.
there were, and so it certainly occurred to me, and it was, as a musician, it's what I wanted. Tom gave me the opportunity to design a sequencer, and that was right at the time Roger introduced the drum machine. So the notion of sequencer and drum machine synthesizer, they need to connect together and all be the same time base, all be able to quantize, and it should just work together. So it seemed Oberheim was uniquely suited once Tom decided we could to do a drum machine, that we had all the pieces, right? Yeah. So the Oberheim system predated MIDI by 2 years.
What I don't remember, of course, in the time period that Mark is talking about, I was rushing around trying to keep the company alive, and because we had bought inventory for the Matrix 12, and the Matrix 12 was a couple months late, and that's nothing in our industry. I mean, over and over, we'd go to the NAMM show and see some competitor bring out a new unit, and it doesn't end up in music stores for a year. So 2 months was nothing, but it's 2 months of having to pay for this inventory. That's really what hurt her. But my point is that I don't remember us conceiving of what became the workstation that became so popular 5 years later. Do you remember that?
Well, I do. I mean, again, I guess.
I mean, we did. The Matrix 12 was the ultimate synth.
That was the ultimate synth, but that was actually later, right? Because we introduced that in January of '85. Right. I'm thinking right when I started. I mean, it was the perfect serendipitous moment for me. Tom and Jim had the foresight to have designed. You did it originally as an option to the OBX, this computer interface. You had the notion of maybe doing a sequencer. You weren't even sure what you might do with it. But if we just bring the entire computer bus out on a connector, you could do anything with it. So this connector was there. Tom introduced me. He says, he knew that I'd played around with coding up different sequencer things on a synclavier and even on an Apple II computer back in the day. And so it's like, why don't you work on a sequencer? So I drew up a sequencer, but that was within just months of me starting at Oberheim is when Roger Lynn did a presentation at the Audio Engineering Society meeting at Sportsman's Lodge in Studio City in October of 1980, and he showed his LM1, and I was blown away. I was blown away by Roger, because he did a wonderful presentation, but also the drum machine, and it's like right away it occurred to me, it's like we need to do drum machine and sequencer. We started on the sequencer, and it's like these both need to be done together, and we launched those in '81. And I'm not sure, I don't remember who came up with calling it the system. There was even a band, David Frank, called The System.
There was,
that used the Oberheim system.
Don't disturb
Wow.
this groove.
You know, yeah, great stuff.
Great song.
And that would I'd say would be the first time I got to experience what Tom had experienced quite a bit, which is hearing these songwriters and musicians creating music with
Right.
these tools in a way that they couldn't before, and that really is a fantastic experience.
You were going to integrate it for them, though. That's kind of next level.
Right. So as you know, you'd had songwriters who would just, you know, they wouldn't necessarily have known how to figure out how to hook up a Dr. Click to do this and that, and they do I could hook up one cable between my sequencer and drum machine, and one cable to the synthesizer, hit record, play drums, play keys, and it all just worked.
Yeah. Creatively, it was huge because you could hear it and you can edit it. Like it wasn't like you had to record it on your home, you know, even 8-track, 80.5-inch 8-track. But then you're kind of stuck and you're bouncing tracks and everything. You guys are starting to open that up, and you can make little changes with the MIDI and hear your music and, you know,
Actually, that's
editing.
another good point that maybe gets lost today. Tracks, you know, typically what you could record with at home wasn't the greatest audio quality unless you were a real pro and had expensive
No.
machines. But also tracks were at a premium. So one of the things that we had, there was a simple FSK clock signal that came out of these machines. So it was a poor man's SMPTE, but you basically could record a sync track on one of your audio tracks. And now your synthesizers and drum machines could be all playing live.
It created a new sound, almost like Phil Spector had a sound of pop orchestrating. There was a whole new sound now of pop orchestrating because of this.
Yeah.
That we still hear today, and you can kind of choose, but it's really another palette.
Yeah.
It was amazing to me. I was like, wow, I could do this. And first we were like, and it was the same thing with the drum machine, you know, programming parts that the drummer couldn't play. And it was like, ooh, do we do that? Well,
Yeah, I remember that.
Why not? Like, can the hi-hat, like, he's out of hands now.
He's out of hand.
Yeah, so you can't do it.
It's funny, I hear some of those early drum machine songs where there's just like so much going on, right? And I feel like it's just because it was there. It's like, well, we're not using the cowbell yet, and what about the shaker? And there's the clave, and all of a sudden you're just hearing all of these extra sounds in the song because you just kind of kept playing more drum
Until
parts.
the DAC wouldn't allow it because it was sharing one or something.
No, even back then, technically, you had a separate DAC for each drum voice card, so you could do them all at once. You could mix them all, and there was a lot of music that's what it sounds like. It's like, they're playing every button on the drum machine.
Yeah, but it was truly like a turning point, I think, in music. These, you know, and then Synclavier integrated it, you know, with the digital recorder, and then you stepped in and you brought digital recording technology, and then you have to see our video to do that. But
Stay tuned.
I'm super excited to let you know that I have a Patreon where you can get exclusive videos and interactive live streams. So click the link in the description for more information, and let's get back to the video. Well, a lot of this, though, your mentor's right here.
Yeah.
And from you, it's on the shoulders of giants, though.
Yeah.
And then you took that, and then you became a giant and a mentor to many others. And I know, like, for Rob,
100%.
you're sitting in the middle of it. How did this affect you? Like and now also being able to interact with these guys.
Well, I feel highly unqualified to be in this room. Let me just say that first and foremost. I'm also very grateful.
Till you need your synth fixed.
I have a very strange reputation when it comes to Oberheim because for some reason people are like, oh, Rob can fix any Oberheim product. I can fix a lot of products. I do like the Oberheim stuff a lot. And it does mean a lot to me to be sitting here with all of you, especially Jill. And you've afforded, by what you did, careers to this day. It's still rippling out. I have a staff. Other people in this country have businesses and staffs fixing these products that still work. If you really want to think about longevity, these things still work and they still sound really, really, really good. And they're iconic. And I think personally, on the record, that the Oberheim stuff is the best of the classic products. Like whenever somebody calls me for a 4-voice, 2-voice, 8-voice, I always tell them the same thing. You're purchasing the best synthesizer, sound-wise, looks-wise, that exist. And I do believe that it's subjective, of course. To me, it's subjective, but I think it's the greatest thing. And myself and my staff, my family, of course, are very grateful for what you created. I can't say that enough.
One thing that I gotta mention. A OBX, let's say that Rob's gotten it working. It's a very valuable instrument. Certainly people pay enough for them. But if it's 1979, if you had a Apple computer from 1979, you're not going to use it.
No.
Why is a musical instrument valuable and a computer or something like that from the same time frame isn't valuable?
I want to answer that.
Good.
I want to answer that. It's because there is, and I don't ever go here if anything, but this is, I believe this. These things do live and breathe, and they do have a soul, and that does come from what you were saying earlier about the resistors in the SEM. You have to regard that as art. Even if it's science, your ear and what you did was art, and that DNA is the Oberheim sound, and that has gone into every product from there on out. And that's a very impressive thing. They also have a look, and that's one thing I wanted to ask you. Your stuff looks a lot different than the black etched faceplate of a Moog, or even Dave Smith said that the inspiration for the body of a prophet was a mini Moog. But you came in with the white tuxedo, with the SEM and the DS-2 for that matter. The DS-2 looks like something that could be in a cockpit. And it's got a very unique look, and it's very aesthetic. And I'm not usually into aesthetics, but it is a very aesthetic thing, and the SEM is as well. And I imagine those earlier days you didn't have access to somebody who was a master designer. It was probably you or somebody close to you. And I'd like to know a little bit more about how those things came to have the look that they have.
Well, I can actually answer that question, I think, pretty well. The two things affected my design of the Oberheim stuff. One was the original owner's manual for the ARP 2600, which is what I learned on, that talked about VCOs going into the filter, going into the VCA, envelope generator, 1 and 2, LFO. And I've never been able to figure out a Prophet 5. I mean, I haven't spent hours trying to do, but it never flowed for me. Whereas if you look at an SEM and you look at the OBX, which turned out to the OBX-A, the OB8, and then the OBX-X8, it's right out of the ARP 2600 owner's manual. It's like this. I could understand this, and I think it was that to a lot of people this resonated, that they were, because the panel is the same as the block diagram.
Yeah.
And the other thing I learned designing these smaller systems is the worst thing, if you've got a front panel that people have to use, the worst thing you can do is take all your switches and all your pots and draw a grid and fill every spot on the panel with something.
Yes.
That's the worst thing you can do for understanding the instrument. So you look at an OBX or OBX-A, OB8, they're not totally filled up.
They're not dense.
You know, well, where's the thing that allows me to do this special function that da-da-da? Well, we don't have that. So one guy is missing something, but hopefully 10 or 100 other guys, I like to think, can walk up to an OBX, OBX-A, OB8, Matrix 12, Xpander, and better than I think some other machines, they can immediately use it.
And fill that negative space with music. This
Well,
is like the
that's
most
right.
profound thing for
Nice,
me.
yeah.
It's just resonating like crazy because it's what you learn in music. It's the notes you don't play. It's
right.
play
Well,
the
that's right.
rest. All the stuff I've heard over and over, and you just rang a giant clanging bell in my head about now when I look, why I love looking at the front panel, because I can flow. And the space does something to you.
Yeah.
You feel it. It's like the release of a certain pressure, like when you're in a city that's really congested and then you see an open space. There's something that goes on with human beings. And this is an expressive medium that we're talking about because you had a music background. And even a singer, what do you have to do before you play the note? You have to breathe.
Yeah, that's true,
And that
you do.
takes a second. You can't just run notes together. You have, when you write for singers, you have to leave space for them to breathe. And they can't hold the note. I mean, all of this is just going, maybe I'm taking it too far, but I think
No, I
these
think
things
that's-
happen for a reason. And it's the beauty of it. It's like Cremona, Italy came to Santa Monica, to Los Angeles, and you built a Stradivarius.
So you made this.
Back to the bag.
Back to this is the last thing in the bag.
This is awesome,
that-
Rob.
So here's an
you go.
original
Now,
synthesizer expander
obviously,
module.
I wanted to make it small, but it's
Okay.
just, you know, it's. Well, remember, first of all, this was going to be the world's smallest, cheapest. No, I don't know about cheapest, but the smallest, simplest synthesizer ever.
Best sounding too.
And you would have called this basically an accessory for other
this was
synthesizers.
in 1974 when I and the people that helped me design this, it was to add on to your current synth.
May I turn it around?
Sure.
There you go.
Oh, there we yeah, that makes sense. And everything's here.
Yeah.
And now, it's true in this case you have to kind of go along here and then you have to kind of drop down to here. But if you took this part and you put it over here, you're kind of getting close to the OBX XA. It's sort of, but it had to be something that I could understand before I was done with it. And there are a lot of stuff that out there now that you can get twice as much stuff on this panel, but figuring out how to use it.
Do you remember what led you to choose the cream color?
Oh, I was tired of everything black.
That's sometimes all it takes. And also, so this is a very nerdy detail, but as you said, like it's a flow. You blocked out each section, but it's kind of interesting that it's dashed lines. And in fact, when you did artwork back then, you can almost tell that someone probably had to do that by hand, you know, to do each of those. Do you have any recollection, like why in this case it was dashed lines instead of solid lines?
No.
Don't be gentle with it, by the way. This belongs to a good friend of mine.
Oh yeah,
If it
for
breaks,
the
I'll
picture.
fix it.
Yeah.
Well, I know you know it
do you-
forward and
do you-
backwards
yeah.
and upside down.
Do you,
Well,
do you see what I mean about the dashed lines?
I think I saw something in maybe a piece of equipment used in development of electronic.
Maybe some
Not
test-
outside of
test
music.
equipment?
It just seemed to be less black and white.
Well, like Harold Rhodes developed like the writing, the script, and the look of the Fender Rhodes after Lincoln Continental.
Oh yeah,
right?
Because he
would
liked
be
it.
lawyer-
So
that would
these
be-
things, maybe Marcus, I don't know, but I'm just
Yeah.
guessing.
That
you
would
see
be- oh,
things
yeah.
and they flow through your head, and you're just like, I just like that.
Yeah, I knew for a while. Harold well.
You mentioned that you wanted people to come up to things and they could basically just get on with it. The synth didn't do more than what met the eye, but in a lot of ways. But this did, and on the back,
Well,
it's
yeah.
essentially a modular synthesizer.
That was another thing. But see, this is well, okay. So the back of this has all these little connectors.
Which, by the way, I heard were dyed with RIT dye. That you guys dyed those
Well,
yourself?
no, that come in. Maybe you could buy them colored. Colored. And so all of the things that did not show up in the front panel, you could do here, and some people use that. But I love the look of it. It's just so nice and colorful.
It's a wonderful design in every way, really. But it was interesting to me to know that you guys populated, I think with very few exception, everything, including almost all the patch points for every product. So somebody could just take this and go crazy.
Well,
and they
you
did.
could certainly, and it's been, if you look at the synthesizer I did long after so much had happened, which was in 2015 when I did my new version of the two-voice, Oberheim two-voice. It has a patch panel that's got 40 jacks on it.
Wow.
That's basically just bringing these points here, but it's, of course, it's 40 years later.
But you brought it to the user.
Yeah,
Right.
so
I love the yellow. I'll
Yeah.
tell you, that logo,
Yeah. And the logo.
the yellow splash is a monster. Because I would see it on synths. Because, I didn't really have an Oberheim synth until you turned me on to it, Rob.
That's right.
I
So
didn't.
apparently you used a OBX with
I was in a band with Diane Reeves and Billy Childs
Billy
for
Childs,
2 years. And Billy had an OBX. Did you know Billy?
no, I know his music,
Amazing
but
jazz
I
pianist,
never
right?
met him. No.
We're still really close friends. We met at USC. And I had a Prophet. And there was an intro to this song he had called Rustic Celebration that I would play, when he was on the road with Fred. That's how I got in the band in the first place. He would be on the road with Freddie Hubbard and there needed to be somebody to sub for him. So he picks me. And it was like, what a trial by fire, trying to play Billy's music and hang in there with Diane and all these, I wasn't a jazz musician. But I learned to be one with a blowtorch on me. But when I would play the song when he was gone on my Prophet, I couldn't get it because I could get the sound. I could get the part, but it was that resonant filter because I would lose all the bass and I'd get that funky sound, but it was all thin. And then everyone would say, oh, the OBX is a killer. I'm like, I don't know, ARP and Prophet, that's what I had. So I was just like really biased because I had it. And then I started realizing there's something special about this instrument. And I didn't have one until then. Rob turned me on to it and I got an OBX. And then I really started appreciating, and I felt like I really missed out. But I'm catching up for all the lost time right now. And I have a 4-voice
That's
now.
awesome.
You're good.
Yes.
But you bring up a good point. I remember back in that era, it's kind of like, Strat versus Les Paul, which back then it's like
Absolutely.
you were in one camp or the other. Now it's everyone's like, well, just have it all. But yeah, there were synthesizer camps. There was in the monophonic stuff. It was Moog versus ARP, right? You're in one camp or the other, and then it was Oberheim versus sequential, and it was just really common. And people would defend their choices. Now everyone kind of realized they just did different things, and
They kick you out because when I got a Synclavier, suddenly I was a digital guy.
Right.
And I didn't get any calls to do anything on analog. And that's all I knew, really. And I was running my Synclavier through filters because I was trying to filter out all the hash because I still wanted the sound I liked. But yeah, it was interesting. It was another time period of like, well, you probably felt it. Like you were in the Oberheim and then
Well, the thing
there's a lot of brand loyalty.
what's the Australian machine?
Fairlight.
Fairlight came out, and you could record it and sample playback blew me away, and we were not equipped to do that in those days. We didn't have anybody that knew anything about DSP. But I thought that's it. But it took a while before it got settled out, and now we're 30 years later, and different companies had different mixed success with sample playback, and this stuff's still going strong.
Was there any feature that maybe was on a prototype of one of these that didn't make it, or something you wish it did at the time, or was it?
Well, remember the motivation. The thing I wanted to do was make the simplest possible good synthesizer, so that the DS-2 could run that. So I thought I had it covered pretty well.
I agree.
The thing I did that was both I think was good for some people and not good for others, is that, for instance, this modulation control on VCO1 I'm playing with, that controls two separate things with one knob, and I want it to be small. Some people need a knob for everything, but
There's a lot of musical stuff on here, and the variable state filter where you can get it in the middle, get it in the cracks.
Who does this belong to?
This belongs to my very good friend Chris McClenny, and he
Sure is
ripped it out of
clean.
his 4-voice for this trip.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Love you, Chris. But this is one that we serviced a really long time ago, and I know he loves this thing, as do I.
It looks like the day it came out of the factory.
They hold up well. They were just like everything else back then in a lot of ways, just really well made.
Yeah.
They just don't deteriorate in the same way that modern things do. But there's nothing about this that makes me wonder what could have been better.
One thing I was very proud of is when we did the OBXA. OBX was every one of those knobs, and back then was $2. Now every one of those knobs for $4 or $5, and I just had to go for it on the OBX. But OBXA, I took those knobs and had them custom.
Oh, interesting.
That's
So
when it went to a D shaft.
I did not realize that the D shaft.
Okay.
I did not realize that the D shaft was not Elma. That you guys.
No,
have that made.
if the pot's a D shaft, it's my own pot.
Yeah. Knob.
Oh, knob,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a piece of history I certainly did not know.
And you can know, if you're curious, if you pull on a knob, if you can pull it off,
It's a D shaft.
it's your D shaft.
Yeah, the OBX,
You can't pull these off.
It's
because the
called.
OBX had two different revs where I guess most of them have like the mat of this, call it top knob, and then the last ones had the D shaft where they actually aligned, because I guess they all have the D shaft, but if you put a D shaft like an OBXA knob, most OBXs it won't line. Indicators won't
That's
line
actually
up.
a practical good point. All of these synths, where the arrow is pointing, that's all manually placed when you tighten the knob on. You've got to position it properly.
Yep.
Or you could have the
matters.
arrow be in the totally wrong place. Where what we're talking about with the D shaft, the knob and the pot automatically aligned by design, so it was just always in the right place.
I mean, if there's is there anything that you...
Oh, well,
What did you want? You had a Joe Zawinul.
oh yeah, I have to tell, I've told this story many times. He had started Weather Report, and I'd gotten their first 2 albums, and I thought it was interesting. And
With the great Wayne Shorter, too. What a combination.
I didn't really give a lot of thought to what Joe was doing with synthesizer, because the first couple albums, and then when the group was new, it was really more pure jazz than what it became. But one day, must have been 1976 sometime, Joe called me on the phone and said, Tom, I bought one of your 8-voice, and I wonder if you'd come out. In those days, he lived in Pasadena, just above the Rose Bowl. And he said, you come out to my house and show me some stuff on this. So and this is a lesson. This is a lesson. This is a story about a lesson that I learned. So I went out to Joe's place, and he had a quite large house, and in his living room was his grand piano and his 2600 and the other stuff he was using, and his 8 voice. And like a good engineer, I started describing, VCOs make the pitch, and the filter kind of changes the sound, and then you can add resonance, and then you got the envelopes and attack that go fast and or slow, and I could see just going right over his head. That's the only way I knew to tell him. I didn't. There's no other way to have. So I left him there with his 8 voice, and figured, he'll probably just take it back to the music store, bought it, and get his money back, because I felt like I didn't help him out at all. So I think about 6 weeks pass, and he calls me on the phone and says, "Tom, you got to come out and hear this sound I got." And I'm thinking, what? I figured he probably was going to take it back and get his money back, and then he was talking about making a sound, and he didn't pick up on the stuff I was telling him. I didn't think. So I went back out to his house, and he played me a rough mix of Birdland. And of course, I was totally blown away by that.
So he recorded it.
Yeah.
Well, he'd already done it.
played
This
the
is just a
recording.
rough mix on a cassette.
Yeah, demo.
And that section in the middle where he does this big band, oh God, I thought. But the point is that here's this complicated machine. If it was in the industrial electronics, it'd be like an oscilloscope or something where there's so many knobs and you got to know what they do. And no, it's just what I'm hearing on that tape. It's a musical instrument. And I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, it's a musical instrument because it inspires something that brings out emotion in people. And that's going back to the square one where we started today. It's like that inspiration. That's what carried. And then you got it back. He fired back at you, right? Because he was inspired, and he went on to create some of the best synthesizer sounds in history, and it inspired me. Like I was copying Joe Zawinul, but it was like you created the instrument, you gave him your take on it, he took it somewhere else, and then, like you said too, Marcus, like how it just goes out like branches of a tree, and you're at the root.
Well, also it's like, let's say that you were not the great musician that you are, but you were a piano technician. So you're thinking about the nuts and, and is the strings any good, or I don't know what they do. I mean, I don't know what
they do. A lot.
They do a
of
lot of stuff. Or maybe you're a piano maker, and you've got to worry about the wood and the casting, the big metal thing, and then you jump from that to the hundreds or thousands of fantastic keyboard players that make fantastic music. They're not thinking about whether all the nuts are tight, or if something's wrong in the mechanics. They go down and what an incredibly awful human interface it is to to create what they create with these fingers hitting these keys. So I think that's the thing that makes our business different. There's something to what we do that is technical, but it's not just technical. So that's the thing that
I think it's the it's the tool actually becomes part of the art. Mm-hmm. That's the difference, right? If you are a sculptor, you don't look at the chisel, as some magical piece, right? It's the artist's vision. The chisel's the tool they're using, and then you look at the sculpture.
But you can't compare a
Right?
chisel to an Oberheim
You don't think of the
synthesizer.
chisel
To me.
is the tool they use, but when the tool is a musical instrument, it actually becomes part of the art. That's what makes it interesting and makes it so exciting to be involved in the development and see how now those artists use those tools. But it's almost like if you were leaving the chisel in the sculpture, because it's still, it's there, and that's what's interesting.
And I think to add to that point is that you could to get to this point, we're talking now about us technical guys. We've had to go through a lot of learning and experience, but when we're done, somebody said, "Well, Tom, when you hear a synthesizer in a record, does it matter? Do you if it's not an Oberheim, do you not want to hear it?" I said, "No. The first time I hear a record that has a synthesizer on it, I do not immediately think, is it an Oberheim? Because I'm just happy to hear great music from anybody's synthesizer, at least if they're any good." And so what an amazing thing. I mean, in my case, I could have ended up finishing at Kansas State and gone to Wichita and worked for Boeing on the rivets in the rudder of an airplane, or Rob could be, who knows what, working in an office somewhere. And no, we're lucky. We didn't end up there. And Mark's was the same way. We got to do something where our technical work ends up has something a little bit to do with wonderful music.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's easier to see it now, but I was there back then. And there was a tremendous amount of resistance because it wasn't considered a musical instrument.
No, that's true.
And what you guys were fooling around with ships and things, a lot of people are thinking these aren't going to last. They're going to replace musicians. It's a travesty to music. I mean, I heard it all, and the unions were driving us crazy. It wasn't like it is now, and it's a little bit easy to look back. But you and a few pioneers stuck with it, and you just kept pushing. I got to do, like Marcos was trying to get it to the heart of it, but ultimately there really isn't an answer. You did it. It's like one of those things. Why did these people do airplanes? And like, it's one of those things like, what's the saying? Like, I had to, or
because it's there.
Because it's there. That's it. It's like you guys were climbing mountains.
Yeah.
And now it's proliferated. It's everywhere. And it must be a great feeling.
It is a great feeling.
The best feeling in the world as a technical guy is to hear what people like you do with it.
You're a musician too. I'm surrounded by musicians. You guys are, I don't think all of you know the level of musicianship that's here, Tom. I mean, you're super talented. You don't want to count singers as musicians, but too bad for you, because I do, and I know what you sang and what you understood. And Rob, I've heard you play, and Marcus, I know your music. I mean,
I'd still rather hear you play.
You guys are super lucky.
To be honest with
we
you.
all need each other, though, and I was there, and I had to wait for now. And I'm glad Oberheim's back, and thanks to you, Rob, keeping the vintage stuff working.
I really don't want to gloss over this, that the feeling you get from hearing somebody truly super talented play something that you either designed or worked on. Trumps any chops.
That's the essence.
Any three of us probably have. I think we probably all agree with that. And it's really it's a special feeling. That's why when you come to pick up your stuff, I'll noodle for a second and say it's all you, because that's my moment.
But it's the same.
Great.
It's the same way.
It's great.
Not the same way,
guys.
but the same thing. I'm sure you must have some time, or many times, you've sweated over a movie score, and it's so much work, and you gotta not only compose it, you gotta. Maybe you get somebody to do it, but you gotta copy all the parts, and you gotta get the stuff played, and whether you're the conductor. But still, you can go, I'm sure you've more than once in your life gone to a movie, it's your score, you're in the movie theater, listening, relaxing, and you feel good.
It's flight.
And you're not
when it-
thinking
when it
about
soar- when
you're
it
not
lifts.
thinking about you had to change these 8 bars because I don't know the technology, but getting the parts copied and who you don't like the
Yeah, the music
players
editing, the
they got.
orchestrating.
I mean, you're sitting there and it's boy, I'm proud of that. It sounds really nice.
yeah, the emotion
We're lucky people.
That's right.
That's it.
Very lucky.
We're really lucky.
that we could find meaning in life and something we love doing. And well,
But we didn't get there without a lot of work. So
yeah, and there were shoulders of people that graded the chips. And
Yeah.
And I want to speak to the people real quick because again you've mentioned about keeping your employees employed and everything, and sorry to put you on the spot on this one, but it's got to mean something pretty big to you to have someone like Marcus come under you and then fight so hard to get your name back. What does that mean to you?
it means everything. My God, I mean to do what Marcus did. My name is back, and I was able to sell it. Basically, was totally on Marcus's work, in that he found a way and found this magical little pathway between the two sides, and that is a monumental thing. It's not necessarily to do with music directly, but it's monumental.
well,
So,
you deserve that's love just coming back to you, Tom.
That's right.
well,
That's what you put out there, and that's what
sure
came
glad
back.
I hired him in 1960.
He didn't have to do that.
I owe Tom my career. Like I said, it was the best school I ever could have had, and I feel really lucky to have been able to help make that happen. So
Yeah, we're all lucky to see the new stuff too.
That's
yeah.
right.
The new stuff's pretty great. It lives. Oberheim lives.
yeah, lives on.
This has been really
Good fun.
a great. I've been smiling the whole time.
I've been listening a lot.
Yeah, a lot to learn here. I think a lot of example here, seeing how the whole how things can work together. There's sort of a kinetic energy that happened, and it's also being able to identify it. When to move. You had to make certain strategic moves, and there's some risk involved.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
had to time it, and sometimes you failed, and then some of the failures, you realize, or the time ran out on a certain instrument, and you were able to get back in the box and believe. It takes a lot of belief in yourself, too, and just.
Well, I'm just glad analog's back. And I could be wrong, but I blame it on the dance group. The
House music.
when these guys and gals that started playing CDs at parties and just grew up, and now it's huge.
Isn't that ironic? Well, on behalf of my audience, right here. This is for all of you guys because I know that there's really a lot of love coming this
Yeah.
way. So
Yeah, this is fun.
thank
This
you
is
so much
terrific.
for offering us this time in your house, and thank you, Jill, for doing the same. You had a lot of support too. All of you.
Well,
Good Marcus.
I don't know how most people deal with getting old. I've had such a great life with this stuff I've done that I'm just happy. I'm a very happy person. I've had a great life.
I love that.
None of us know what happens when we're not here, but God, I can't complain. I can't complain.
Yeah.
A lot to be grateful for.
Oh, yeah.
And we're doing this just
Just
6 days. You'll be 89, Tom. It's pretty
89.
remarkable.
That was a great hug.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, good.
Thank you. And Rob, thank you, because I owe Rob for making this happen. You're still quite a unifier
Yeah.
when it comes to synthesizers.
I'm just happy to be here. I'd be happy to just be sitting over there and just listening.
Yeah.
But I'm truly honored to be sitting here.
Yeah. So keep dreaming, keep eating, keep taking care of yourself, keep playing synths and learning, read the ARP 2600 owner's manual. We all have, and we all think it's probably the best one ever made.
It's a good one.
Marcus, Rob included. When you said it, it was just like, there we go. It always comes back. I'm not going to recap everything that we said. This is a video I'll be rewatching. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. You guys are great. It allows us to offer things like this that are just emotional and important and inspiring. See you guys next time.